And thank you, Los Angeles Center of Photography. When uh, the wildfires had calmed down and I had a chance to think and see what was happening, um, I approached them about doing a webinar where I could talk about many of the things I've learned about backing up, preservation, archiving, and legacy, which we'll talk about. And they immediately jumped on it and said, this is great for our community. So thank you, Rotem, Brandon, Janice, Kevin, Clay, and Matthew, and everyone else who works there and helps out. It's such a great organization. If you're not a member, I urge you to become one. I also work with an organization called the Photo Managers, and this is kind of my other job where I help clients and people with their family photos, preserving them, organizing them, backing them up, and a lot of legacy work. And when I work with them, before I do anything, the first question I always ask is, is your work, are your photos, are they backed up? What's your situation? Because there's no point in kind of continuing unless I know that what we're going to do is going to be safely backed up. So when the wildfires hit, I'm kind of on the border of Santa Monica. We were never directly in danger, but the first night our power was out, the winds were whipping, you could see flames right over the hills. So we were packed and ready to go. And so all that advice that I had been giving clients all these years became very personal to me. And you are in a very heightened state of mind when you're ready to evacuate and think about what you're taking with you, which could possibly be, the only things remaining from your life. And what I realize is that, like my photography work, years and years, decades and decades of my work and my family photos was all backed up safely, locally, and in the cloud. And so I didn't really have to grab much. And, that's what kind of gave me the idea that, I wanted to share what I do with you, and because if this happens again, and it probably will, in one form or another, um, you want to be prepared. So that's what we're going to talk about. Um, I just want to mention, a lot of people are put off by the technology, and I know it's kind of sometimes an onerous thing to kind of, delve into technology, but, that's where we're at. So I urge you, just a lot of this is simple and can be learned. And so I urge you not to let that get you, in the frame of mind of not being able to do it or being too overwhelmed to take some of these simple steps. The resources that Brandon mentioned, there's a page, a PDF with some of the links about some of the backup systems and companies that I'm going to talk about. And there's a video on how to format external hard drives, because I'm going to talk about how to do that with local drives for local backup. So that's available there. And, we're going to talk about, you know, professional and artist work and so forth, and collections. But what I talk about really can be applied to personal photos. It can be applied to anything. So, you can take this information and really apply it to any of your important digital assets and physical assets, which we'll talk about as well. So I should have put up the splash page, but I'm going to share my page here, and give me 1 second. And there it is. And we are good to go. So let's get started. We're going to talk about kind of two parts to this: how to safely and simply back up your current photo catalog and image collection. In other words, what you have now, how to kind of immediately take steps to back that up and safeguard it. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about how to archive and preserve your photo legacy for the future. In other words, what steps can you take to start to preserve it if it's not in a condition where it can be backed up. So I really think that's important, and we're going to get to that. So one of the fundamental principles of backing up, if you would, is the 3-2-1 system. If you're not familiar with it, it basically means that there's going to be 3 copies of your data to be protected. And it's going to be on two different types of storage media or two different locations. And one of those is going to be offsite. And that's really important. And that was what was so critical to our situation here with the wildfires. So we're going to talk and define backup services because I think there's a lot of confusion about that and what the differences are and how they work. So we're going to talk about cloud sync platforms and how they're different from cloud backup platforms, and then also how to utilize local backup. And as you saw in the 3-2-1, we want local backup and we want an offsite backup, which in this case will be a cloud backup. So let's just kind of dive right in with cloud sync platforms. And I think this is one of the areas that has the most confusion. Um, and often I ask people, oh, is your stuff backed up? And they'll go, well, I think it's on iCloud, or I think it's on Google Drive. And, you know, when we kind of take a deeper dive, it turns out there's some stuff in there and not really. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this, why I don't think this is really the best backup solution, but it does have its value. So let's kind of jump right in here. A cloud sync platform, think of it as like a magic folder on your computer. It's sitting there on your hard drive and it's called iCloud or Google Drive or OneDrive, Dropbox. And whatever you move into that folder also gets synced up to a cloud platform as well. So it exists both on your computer and on a cloud platform. And that's important to understand. It's kind of a two-way street. So if you delete it from your computer, it's going to delete it from the cloud platform. In other words, it's a sync platform. So whatever you put in that folder gets synced to the cloud platform. And some platforms do allow you to optimize files on your computer so it doesn't take up storage space on your computer's drive, but you have to do that manually. And I'll kind of show you an example of that in a minute. So what are these good for? Well, what I use it for, I use Dropbox, and it's great for sharing across devices. So in other words, I have a desktop computer, a laptop, and I have my phone, and I can access any files in Dropbox from any of those devices because they're synced to the Dropbox cloud. So it's great when I want to start working on a different device, I can just access those files. It's great for sharing with others. So in other words, when I send large files to somebody, to a client or to whomever, I can put it on Dropbox and I can send them a link and then they can just download it really nice and easy. It works great for that. It can restore older files, so if you inadvertently delete a file, you sometimes have up to 30 days, depending on the company, that you can restore it. But you cannot back up your entire computer. In other words, you can't stick everything in this OneDrive or iCloud or Google Drive. You just can't do that, especially your system. You can't back up external hard drives, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, you can copy the files from an external hard drive into a Google Drive or an iCloud drive, but then it's going to reside on your internal computer's drive and take up space. There's limited or no legacy successions. We'll talk about that. And it's usually a monthly subscription fee based on the storage. They usually have tiers, and you can subscribe and pay monthly for whatever it is you're using. It's not a good backup option for some of the reasons I stated. Specifically, I think most importantly for the reason you can't back up an external hard drive. And of course, that's where we put a lot of our photo files and important large files, movie files. So this is you can see my Dropbox. And the reason I circle this is you can see where it says clients, there's actually a little cloud icon. That means I've optimized it and it doesn't exist on my hard drive and it only exists in the Dropbox cloud. But if I go into that folder and I click on a file, it immediately downloads it. So that's one way to kind of save on storage. And I just did want to show you that option. Now, this is where we get into true backup. Cloud backup platforms, Backblaze, Carbonite, pCloud is a recent, or I think a recent addition to the backup platforms. And this backs up your entire computer and the connected hard drives. That's important. once backed up, and it can take a while. I have terabytes, and it took like a month or two to back it up. I use Backblaze, but it will keep backing up changes and new files. And it's either can be set to do it continuously or once a day or manually when you tell it to. It works in the background and it doesn't interrupt your workflow. It actually has settings so that it only uses enough bandwidth to do what it needs to do without kind of interfering with what you're doing. And that's very cool. So it's great for backing up computers and EHD's external hard drives, and that's important. It can restore older files. It can often restore an entire system. So if your entire computer crashes, you can usually restore your entire system. That's pretty good. It encrypts files. That's really important with hacking. We want to know that our files are safe and encrypted, and if somebody gets a hold of them, they won't be able to read them. Um, you can, on some of these, like in Backblaze, you can, if my entire hard drive went down, instead of having to download those terabytes, they'll ship it to me on a hard drive where I can then kind of reload it to my system. That's great, and that will save a lot of time. It does not really have legacy succession. Some companies have limited. It's usually a yearly fee, and that tends to work out cheaper than a cloud sync subscription. So, another reason why this works better as a backup, and this really is a good offsite backup option. So, this is what I utilize. In addition, well, let me show you, this is my Backblaze interface here. And you can see these are hard drives. It's a X Factor is a hard drive, personal photo archive, and my internal hard drive. And then I have another one, which is not plugged in, but if I plugged it in, it would back it up. And, here's the great thing about some of the, well, I'll say for Backblaze is there's no file limits. There's no storage limits. Some do, it depends on the company, but I guess I'm kind of promoting Backblaze. I pay, I think it's $100 a year, and I can back up as much as I want and as many hard drives as I want. To me, this is a no-brainer. And when I backed everything up to Backblaze a few years ago, I tell you, I felt such a sense of relief. Now, I also utilize that as part of the 3-2-1 with a local backup. And, this is really easy to do and there's no excuse. Now, some people will say, well, I just need local backup. But, if you went through the fires or you've been through any kind of, traumatic event, earthquake, fires, floods, local backup, it can all be wiped out in an instant. So that's why you need that offsite backup. And if you're on a Mac, Time Machine is a utility that easily is set up to back up to an external hard drive. File history works for Windows, and it's part of the system, so that these are free and available on Windows 11 and whatever Mac OS you're using. And there are third-party software for local backup as well. It backs up your entire computer and connected hard drives, just like an offsite backup. Once backed up, it will keep backing up changes and new files either continuously once a day or when you manually tell it to, again, like a cloud backup. And it works in the background. It doesn't interrupt your workflow. So it is easy to access restored files because it's on a local hard drive. In fact, just before this started, I realized I messed up and I had inadvertently deleted my script. I'm not working off of a script, but in case I have it here. And so I went into Time Machine and I just dragged yesterday's version of it, and I'm good to go. So it is really handy to have. And it does back up external hard drives as well. The only limit is the size of the Time Machine or the file history drive that you're going to use to back up to. So if you have like a 2 terabyte external hard drive with all your photos and you have a 1 terabyte internal drive, you want to make sure you have a 6 or a 7 terabyte external hard drive that you're backing up with Time Machine or file history. That's important so it can accommodate everything. The two videos are going to tell you how to format these external hard drives that you're going to use for Time Machine or file history. And you need to be careful about that, but the videos go through it step by step, and it's really pretty simple. Just make sure you do it correctly. These are the settings. This is Time Machine on the left. It's just easy to set up, and file history on your Windows machine. You can find them in the general settings and then under Time Machine for your Mac. And then in settings and then backup, you will find the file history utility. So the 3-2-1 strategy, the main collection, your main photo collection or whatever, anything, photo collection, personal files, personal photos, should be, it's either on your computer's internal hard drive or on an external hard drive, which I recommend because then you really have a much larger drive that you can work with and swap out if it should, be problematic. And then a local backup to an external hard drive using Time Machine, file history, or third party. That's your local backup. And then your last one is a backup to a cloud backup service using Backblaze, Carbonite, pCloud, or whatever. And you will sleep better at night, I assure you. So that is essentially how to preserve and backup and safeguard your current assets. Now, let's keep going. We've covered steps that you can take to preserve what you've already digitized, but what about going forward? And this is a lot of the work I'm doing is about legacy work, preserving legacy, family, personal history, photos. But we're talking today because a lot of us photographers or artists our life's work, right? Our life's work. How do we make sure that it's safe going forward? Because some of it may not be in a condition where we can do those backup steps we just talked about. So how do you archive and preserve your photo legacy for the future? Well, like I said, over the past few years, I've worked with families and I've tried to help them preserve and archive their family photos and their family history. But as a photographer, I started becoming concerned with my own professional legacy and preserving that. And if you're of a certain age, as I am, your photographic career probably spanned both analog and digital capture. Now, archiving prints and negatives and other analog media has been pretty set and very specific guidelines that have been in place for years. And we'll look at some of that. The materials are available, and really the biggest job is just sorting through your analog assets, editing them down, and then placing them in archival containers. But digital archiving, it presents really kind of new and uncertain challenges. It's really in its infancy. Digital preservation is really new, and there's no universally accepted guidelines. And so there's a lot of questions about how to really do it properly and safeguard digital assets effectively. I've worked out a system that I think is as good as any, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And there's no specific ways to do things. I can't really go into a lot of the detail that I could. I'm just going to present you with some ideas that you can then take and start to implement yourself. And there's resources out there and ways to kind of learn how to do this. But I just want to at least get you started because that's so important. The first step in the preservation process is really assessing your photo collection. What do you want your legacy to be? It really may not be realistic to think you can pass on your entire photographic archive in equal measure, but this is something you can decide for yourself. Unless you really are a renowned photographer and artist with an established body of collectible work, it may be best rather to take a more humble approach and decide what out of your life's work you wish to preserve and make available to others. So these are some questions you might want to use in assessing what subjects or projects in your collection have enduring value? What might be of historical or educational or personal interest? And then I think very important, what represents your career and vision most effectively? I would say that a well-curated collection that tells stories or highlights specific subjects of interest or any of these things I mentioned, it's more likely to endure than a hodgepodge of work, unified maybe only by the fact that one person took all the photos. Now, that doesn't mean you have to discard everything outside of these curated collections. You can pass your assets on to a family member or legacy contact, as we will discuss. But I think prioritizing, and that's the key word, prioritizing specific bodies of work, and increases the opportunities for sharing and having them endure, and even placing them in historical archives. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit. Um, and this, as I mentioned, this will also work for family and personal photos as well. This idea that of curating it down so that it is more easily archivable and savable, and it's not a word, but pass onable, for lack of a better description. So these are kind of my steps for archiving. Collecting, and we'll go through it just a little bit greater detail. Digitizing, right, if you have analog assets. Curating it, as I just mentioned. Creating, archiving, and succession. So collecting your assets, be they analog or digital, you want to create a list of all the potential places that they've been stored. Gather your work from various locations, be they boxes, file cabinets, digital stuff would be on computers, external hard drives, cloud platforms. I could make a list of about 20 places you could start to look, but you start to get the idea. You need a list because you're going to go on a kind of a mission to find this stuff. And with the analog assets, you do need to digitize it, right? Obviously, if you have, especially negatives and slides, these are unique, one of a kind items. And if they're gone in a fire or a flood, that's it. They need to be digitized. And it doesn't mean you don't want to safeguard the physical assets, but by digitizing them, you're ensuring that they will be able to be archived redundantly and safeguarded in the event of a disaster. Um, and where do you start? I think you start with specific projects or bodies of work with the most archival value based on maybe those three questions I have, enduring value, personal, value to you, and so forth. Um, Once you do digitize and you add them to your existing digital collection, and again, this is just very, very brief summary of how you would do it. You use a catalog software like Lightroom or Bridge or whatever it is you use to organize and curate your images. And I think that initial curation is best to do with collections or albums, which are virtual organizations. In other words, you don't want to start moving stuff around your original files until you kind of have an idea of how you may want to kind of organize them. Um, and you want to focus on creating identifiable bodies of work that, as I said, tell cohesive stories or highlight key subjects. And this is our work we know best. And um, I'll talk about my work in a minute and how I approached it. Uh, Creating, and this may sound weird, but I think creating different ways of showcasing these curated bodies of work, such as books or putting together shows or any other kind of medium where you can kind of, showcase these bodies of work. Books are very archivable and is a wonderful way to kind of gather things. But, when these are curated, they become a lot more easier to work with. And to archive. So I think creating also generates enthusiasm. And in other words, we don't want to kind of see this just as like this kind of like perfunctory process. I got to archive. When we can inject some enthusiasm, some creativity in there, I think it kind of makes us want to do it more, and that's important. So whatever we can do to generate some enthusiasm and momentum, I think is important. And again, I'll talk a little bit about my work and what I've done. Archiving, use archival quality materials for the analog assets and ensure that the digital files are stored redundantly, multiple hard drives and cloud storage. And we're going to circle back to this, and we're going to circle back to succession, identifying a legacy contact or family member to help you manage your archive. Consider placing significant works in historical or institutional archives, and a personal historical archive such as permanent.org, which probably makes no sense to you, but we're going to talk about that. It's something I'm excited about and I think can have real value to a lot of us. So let's talk about these last two, archiving and succession. So what's the best archival method that's ever been invented? It's kind of it's not a joke, but it's cave drawings. These things have survived thousands and thousands of years, millennia, right? But it's not really a suitable way for us to archive our work, right? These cave drawings have existed and really tell stories from thousands and thousands of years ago. That's what we want to do. We want to tell our stories. So what do we do? Let's start with analog archiving. I mentioned, a lot of analog and physical archiving. These guidelines have been in place for a long time. But and I'll show you some examples of archival containers and sheets. You have to remember, and this is another reason we want to curate things down. Whatever you want to archive and preserve needs to have information that's identifying what it is, right? Because what people will be looking at in the future, they will need to know understand what it is, right? So for everything that you archive, you need to have some kind of identification. Something called a finding aid, which is kind of a summary of the contents of the collection, kind of listing, in this box there's this, and this box there's that. But each container should have more detailed description. So, with family photos, if you've ever looked at an album from a family member from, 50, 60 years ago and gone, who is this person and where are they? Well, that's what you want to avoid, be it your personal photos or your professional work. You want to have that identified. You don't want to, we look at Vivian Mayer, and some, blessedly they found her work. But think of all the photographers whose work sat in boxes and was never discovered. And even if it was, nobody had any idea of what they were looking at. We don't want to be those people. So here's some archival containers. These are made from archival materials that don't off-gas. And most importantly, they do not let light in. Light is especially the worst. Oxidation and light is the most damaging to prints and a lot of our other film materials. Slides, and you can see you can put them in bulk containers, the slides in the upper left, or in sheets. It really depends. And these are usually made out of polypropylene. It's a archival plastic that will protect and not off gas. Now, a lot of people have those old glassine envelopes, and I still have all my negatives in them. But if they get wet or any moisture, it sticks to the emulsion, and that could be disastrous. So I've been moving my stuff over to these polypropylene. These are from my friends at Archival Methods, one of the companies that I use and highly recommend. And they have products for everything, for letters and documents and anything. You can really kind of get lost in there, but it's a wonderful way to kind of explore, these archival products. Now, digital archiving, you want to use a separate external hard drive for archiving. Let me explain that. Why a separate hard drive? Well, your current photo library's organization may make sense to you, but it probably won't to whomever is looking at it down the road. And as I mentioned, you want to curate it. So everything you pass on needs to be identified and more curated. And it's just a lot easier to kind of organize it, curate it, and put it on an external drive that is dedicated in addition to your main drive and main collection, which you'll continue to work with and access. And then you can add to this archival drive, this legacy collection, if you will, and have that dedicated for your legacy and your professional work that you want to protect. And so how do you archive an external hard drive? So you put a curated collection that's identified and stuff, you put it and copy it over to an external hard drive. Well, there's no such thing as an archival external hard drive. There are studies that come out that show the longevity and failure rates of different drives, but none of them come close to really being archival. And there's a more important consideration, and that is that drive connectivity. Even if you could create an external hard drive that would last 30 years, I guarantee you that in time, there will be so many multiple conversions in terms of ports and plugs and cable, making whatever that drive is using obsolete, right? So a 30-year-old archival drive is probably not going to be accessible. You're going to have to kind of keep up with new technologies. Connecting it to whatever kind of computers we have in the future is going to get more difficult as well. So what you want to do to ensure that connectivity for as long as you can is to keep adapters as they come out with them, right? We all know like all the different adapters and USB uses. So we want to keep the adapters available. So we keep plugging it into computers. You want to keep it in a cool and dry place because electronics abhors dampness and heat, and that will shorten the lifespan. And when new technologies come along, then we migrate it to whatever that is, be it a chip in our arm or whatever they come up with. There will be, right? Because we know that I thought I had a picture of old floppy disks, to drive home the point of how far we've come. And you want to, if you have an external drive dedicated to your archive, you want it redundantly backed up. So what I would do is just add it to my Time Machine backup and add it to my Backblaze backup. So even though it's a standalone archival hard drive, it's being backed up to offsite and to another local drive, just in case when that drive fails, I can swap it out and keep it going. And I hope that makes sense. And then you want offsite backup of the external hard drive, which I just mentioned. And for other kind of digital archiving, what I just mentioned is what we can do in terms of hard drives and redundancy and keeping up with technology. I mentioned historical archives. Now, this is not going to apply to everything you do, but it may apply to some. So I have two collections which I focus my archiving on. Many of you know I've photographed and documented the Los Angeles River for many years. I did a book on that, and as I mentioned, books are wonderful ways to archive stuff, right? Because they can last for decades, but they're also reprintable. So there's something nice about the idea of a book. But I've been putting those images through the help of my friend Tilly Hinton into the Western Water Archives at I forget the university, I'm just blanking out. It's a local university here. And in that historical archive, they live on and they're helpful to others for educational purposes, for whatever. So there's really something very, I don't know, very encouraging. I'm not finding the right word to know that your work lives on and is available and will be available past your lifetime. And that's really what kind of archiving is. It's going past your archive, your lifetime. And the idea of that external hard drive, being passed on. We'll talk about succession in a second and how that can work. Now, I've talked about personal archives, and I mentioned permanent.org and a company called forever.com. These are literally personal archives. And the reason that they're different is that they have a built-in mechanism that does allow them to live on past one's lifetime. So in other words, let me kind of show you this. I have an account with them and I have multiple archives. On one of them, this is my other collection I've been working with. Images I shot in the 1980s in New York in the East Village and Lower East Side where I grew up. And I have like hundreds of Kodachromes, and these have been going out for shows. I'm creating a book, but I wanted them to live on and be available. They are going in an historical archive in the Greenwich Village Historical Preservation Society, which is kind of my hometown preservation society, and that's really rewarding. But this personal archive I set up on permanent.org. Permanent.org is a nonprofit, and what their mission is to create archives that are, as the name suggests, permanent. So I can create multiple archives. I'll show you one I did for my family in a second. But I upload pictures. I can tell stories. I can have information when you click on the image about each image. I can have a timeline. I can post videos. In other words, it's an historical archive, but it's a personal one. So it has all the benefits and the longevity of a historical archive, but it's accessible to each and every one of us. And I think that is really critical and a rare thing until recently. So I'm a big fan of Permanent. They are making inroads, and of course, there's no guarantees, but they have a system set up so that there's an endowment that keeps the storage in perpetuity, or at least 100 years. And I won't live 100 years, so that's past my lifetime. And I know that this is public. This is a public gallery. You can also set private. And I can't go too much into it, but I'm happy to talk to anybody about this. And this is one I set up for my grandfather, who was a photographer on the Coney Island Boardwalk in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. And it's so I keep saying rewarding, but to be able to tell your family history in a way, so I have a narrative, I have timelines, and I've identified as many people as I can in each photo, so that when somebody looks at this, be it another family member or somebody who just wants to know about life in Brighton Beach in the 1920s, they can get this information, and it's searchable. It comes up in Google searches, and I just think it's a wonderful and very unique service that we as professionals have available for our professional work and for our personal work. So look into it. Forever is a company, and they do a similar kind of thing, but I'm not going to go into it just for lack of time. Here's the one page where you can manage your digital legacy for Permanent, and you can leave a legacy contact, which is really important. We're going to be wrapping up here in a second, but I just wanted to show you that I can designate, my son, who knows and understands, that he will be taking over, and I can leave instructions to do whatever they want, what I want them to do with this archive. But even if they do nothing, it lives on past either my passing or my incapacitation. So it's a little morbid, but there's something really nice about knowing it's going to live on. A legacy contact, succession is a big part. It should be a family member. This is mostly for family stuff. Younger generation, you obviously don't want to ask anybody who's older than you. You do want to write out careful instructions as to what and where everything is. And I do this with like bank accounts and everything. And there's apps and all sorts of products out there that will even help you with this. It has information about my websites and the passwords. And you need to work closely with that legacy contact so as to how to pass on those instructions, either beforehand or after your passing. And Apple and even Android offer legacy contacts Apple, you have to kind of go in there. I don't have time, but that way somebody, when you pass, has access to your Apple and iCloud and all that stuff as well. Pretty good. So I always remind people it's a process. It's not an event. So just get started and be patient. Make slow and steady progress. Try to be creative in some of the things that you're going to create to be archived. And I don't have time to talk about some of the stuff that I'm doing, but I enjoy the process. I just wish I could do it faster. But again, it's slow and steady progress. And enjoy the ride. And that was a lot of information coming at you. I hope it was helpful. I'm going to kind of stop sharing and I'm going to see if there's any questions. I see there's 8 questions. So I'm going to go through that. Um, from Lori. Hi, Lori. The cloud platform on my iPhone is different than the cloud from my PC. Yes. I thought that if I deleted files from my phone, it was still on the cloud. No, that is unless you, it's a sync platform. So I'm not sure. Usually OneDrive works with PCs and iPhones, it's usually going to be iCloud. So you need to get clear on that. But if you delete it on your local device, it will delete it off the cloud. You will be able to restore it. Now, unless there's something I don't know, but that is mostly the case. So I hope that helps. Is Carbon Copy Cloner any good? And is it similar to what you're discussing? Yes, it is, but you have to pay for it. And, for me, why not use free? So Time Machine and File History do a really great job. But if you already have it, or you just kind of feel you want to, Carbon Copy Cloner is a third-party backup for local backup. I don't believe they have any cloud component, but I could be wrong. So nothing wrong with it, but again, I like free. Can you back up Time Machine or is this redundant? I notice you don't have it checked off. Yes, you cannot back up Time Machine. Time Machine is backed up. So you don't want to back up the backup. It is redundant. And that's from anonymous attendee. So good question. But yes, you don't want to back up Time Machine. Makes no sense. Any suggestions on ways to upload when first beginning with something like Backblaze when you have amounts of? Yes, that's a great question, Lauren. You know what? I'm going to. Well, I don't know if I don't know if anybody can see it, but you can all go into the Q&A, I guess, maybe and see yourself. So 2 answers to that. Anytime you want to speed up backing something up to something like Backblaze, you're going to do it a lot quicker when you hardwire it, when you tether it to your modem. So in other words, get an Ethernet cord and plug it into your modem and to your computer, and that will quicken the upload significantly. Now on Backblaze, when you go into the settings, there's a way in which you can control how fast the speed of the backup is. It does what's I forget the name, but it slows it down when you are doing other things through your bandwidth so that it doesn't compete. And then theoretically, when you're not doing it, it will speed it up. But you can go in and then manually set it, and you'll see that it will speed it up. It'll tell you how many days in theory it will take or weeks to back it up. But hardwiring it is a great way to, if you don't know what an Ethernet cord is, it looks like one of those old phone jacks. It's a little thicker. And if you plug it into your modem, you'll see that it fits right in there. And then plug it into your computer. It should have an Ethernet port, and that will significantly speed things up. The top comment about backing up Time Machine meant to say on Backblaze. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You don't want to back up Time Machine on Backblaze. It's just a lot of redundancy. When I do Time Machine, it now says I don't have enough storage space. What size should it be? Oh, you just answered my question. Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned, like if you need to do a little math, if your computer and your external hard drives add up to 6 TB, get a 12 TB drive to use for Time Machine, right? And the way Time Machine works is it keeps all old versions until it runs out of space, and then it gets rid of the oldest versions, and it will keep backing up newer stuff. So you will never run out of space on your Time Machine hard drive. It will just kind of get rid of older stuff as necessary. But you want to start off with a, I would say almost twice as much storage as you already have, because the more you have, the more you can back up initially. Maybe I missed this. What's the cost of permanent? I didn't talk about prices. You have to go in there. It's extremely reasonably priced. I guarantee it. And I love the fact that they're nonprofit and they're super helpful. And they're making advancements all the time to make it better. It's still a few years old, but it will get better and better. Any suggestions for scanners for scanning old negatives? Well, I do camera scanning, and that's what I think is the best thing for old negatives. Now, there are scanners that will scan, they're backlit from the lid. Some of the Epsons, they tend to be pretty pricey. So if you are serious about scanning old negatives, I highly recommend looking into negative scanning. And if you want to learn more about it, the person to talk to is Eric Joseph, who's working with a company called Negative Supply. And I am a huge fan of camera scanning. It is not only incredibly faster than a scanner, infinitely faster, but the quality that you can yield is beyond. So I've rescanned everything. Those Kodachromes from the 1980s, I had scanned on high-end scanners and was never happy. I camera scanned. So what does that mean? It means it sits on a light box, and there's a setup and a holder, and then a digital camera, usually with a macro lens of some sort. And you're basically taking a picture of the negative or the slide. And when you're going to capture it, I capture it, I tether it into Lightroom. I don't want to get too complex. It will just automatically go, it's called tethered capture, it goes right into Lightroom. I see exactly what it looks like, and I know, oh, I got it. And it takes 2 seconds to do the scan. It's just as fast as taking a picture. Move on to the next one, move on to the next one. I've been scanning for years, and this is by far the best way to do it. And you can scan them as raw images or convert to DNG. And the latitude that you will have in terms of your the exposure capture is just phenomenal. So by photographing it as a raw, you can get incredible shadow detail. You're not going to burn out highlights. Do I delete my raw? I convert them all to DNG. I would never, ever, ever delete raw unless I didn't convert to DNG. These are like the original captures. They are by definition non-destructive editing. So I think it's, I don't delete. A lot of people are like, delete, delete, delete. Don't delete. Storage is the cheapest thing. So hold on to something that's valuable unless you have multiple copies. Never delete RAW unless you convert to DNG, which is essentially a generic RAW image. But just back to that camera scanning, by capturing it as a raw image, you have amazing latitude with what you can do with them. I highly recommend it, and it's very affordable. I joined late. Did you suggest a professional company for scanning old slides? Scanning old slides. I just mentioned camera scanning. Talk to Eric Joseph. You all probably know who he is. If you don't, he's with Freestyle. If you're at LACP, you know and love Eric. He's been teaching us how to print, and now he's on a mission to teach us about how to do camera scanning. And he can, and if you're like me, also a member of the photo managers, he's coming to our conference in San Diego, and he's going to talk about that. Most of us are familiar with that as well. My questions got skipped over. Where's your question? What if you do not have a legacy contact? Well, You you have to find one. I mean, I don't. I kind of not sure how to answer that. There's no company that I know of that will do it. But like with permanent, you don't need a legacy contact if you don't if you pass away. It just will live on. It's not like it's going to be taken down after your passing. A legacy contact is there to kind of shepherd your hard drive that you've put your archive on. So yeah, Susan, thank you. You could try and find a relative that may be interested in your family photos. Yeah, I think it's easier to find a legacy contact for personal photos because then you can kind of get a younger generation kind of interested in, and you kind of pass on the mantle of being the family historian. And when you do a lot of that when I talk about stories are more intriguing to people. Looking back at family histories, if it's just dry information, can be a little bit turn off to especially younger generations. So, when you turn them into stories, when you have engaging narratives, when you have ways of telling stories that are interesting and engaging, you're going to find that you can get people interested in assisting you, like younger family members. So that's what I would recommend. Beth also asks, so you will need one of your archival drives plugged into your computer at all times? Not all times, but in order to back up via Backblaze. In other words, my archival drive is not something I'm going to be working on every day. In other words, I'm going to archive stuff in probably one process, and then I will be adding to it incrementally, but that won't be on a daily basis. It may be every few weeks or months or whatever. So when I do that, I add that to it, and then I plug it in, back it up to Backblaze and to a local redundant backup as well. To clarify regarding Novus, I have no family, only child, just me remaining, and no one close to choose as a legacy contact. What to do? Well, then it's one of the people that I love working with is uh, Nancy Rose, and I think she's on here. And maybe Nancy, you could kind of put your information in the chat for Beth. A lot of people want to archive their legacy or preserve their legacy, and they have there's a term for not passing it on, and it's not like we don't do it. So I would talk to Nancy, and if you contact me, Beth, and Nancy doesn't put her contact in, I'll put you in touch with her. And she maybe can kind of give you some resources and some ideas and talk to you about it. Your professional work, if you put it on permanent, it will live on. Again, you don't need a legacy contact for this. Um, I'm kind of jumping around. Backblaze deletes everything after 28 days, which is why I keep asking. No, Backblaze does not delete anything after 28 days. It just sign up for the yearly plan and you're fine. No, it will give you warning. It just if you don't plug in the drive every 28 days, you'll get warnings saying plug it in. But if you go on the yearly plan, you won't get that. So I wouldn't worry about it, and it won't delete it. It's not like one day you're just going to find it deleted. Are there any sort of archival trustees? Not that I'm aware of. Um, so the questions are kind of popping up, not chronologically. Um, I hope I've gotten to all the questions. Uh, Oh, and thank you, Susan. She's answering about Backblaze. If you're on an old plan, they've changed it. All data is now stored for a year. That's what I thought. You no longer have to pay extra to store it beyond 30 days. So Backblaze is a great company. I recommend it to all my clients. I use it. And Permanent is what I use for my archives. And uh, if you want to get in touch with me for any questions, I'd be happy to try to help. I am grateful for this opportunity. Take the steps that you can to preserve your work that you have in the condition to be backed up right now. As I indicated, the PDF will have those links for the various cloud platforms and has the video for formatting. And then think about archiving and your legacy and what you want to do. And hopefully, none of us will have to kind of deal with the nightmare that many of us had to deal with several weeks ago. But these disasters can be in the form of wildfires or just a home fire or an earthquake or a flood or mold or any number of things. So you never know when disaster is going to strike. Be prepared and sleep well at night. And with that, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Brandon, for helping out on this. And I'm really grateful to have this opportunity. Good luck, everyone. And I'm sure I'll see some of you around campus. Take care.